You're listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show, giving you weekly sports analysis, opinions, and discussion. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and J-Raff.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 168th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays. Alongside of me, co-host J-Raff.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Last week we had a ton to talk about, and didn't necessarily get to all of it. But in reality, I don't think having our basketball expert on really helped me with my picks.
No, me either. Actually, but that's because I listened to him.
Right? I was going to
say it's because I listened to him. Do you know who I listened to him about?
Iowa
State. And look what happened. This is what happens when I listen to people, because clearly I would have been perfect.
Right.
Look at my one bracket.
I was going to say a couple games in, and your daughter looked like a genius.
Yes, after the first three games, my daughter, the 2-year-old, was leading our bracket challenge. That not only beating me and you, but literally everyone else. Now I think she actually was tied with our friend Megan. And possibly my uncle or aunt. I think there's like a 3-way tie, but Natalie was indeed on top of 30-some brackets, whatever we got. She was up there at first place. Now she's come back to reality because she favored the higher-numbered seeds for most of the games. The only way she'll win would be if Utah takes it all. She went with the... we call them the men from Utah. I'm aware that they're Native Americans, the Utes, but for her sake, when we relayed what teams... when we went with mascots, I just said the men from Utah, and she rolled with them all the way through. She had them beating Coastal Carolina in the national championship game, but we know Coastal Carolina isn't there because Wisconsin pushed them this side.
Yeah. So, but anyway, if once again, it looks like we will be having someone on to host because I don't think you or I are going to run away with. Well,
my second one's not doing too bad.
You're right,
but I do have Kentucky winning, which I know a lot of people do. So.
Mine, it's not looking good. But anyway, so we talked a little bit about the tournament last week. It's good to be back. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, but we have some other things to talk about tonight too.
Yeah, I guess probably before we move on, why don't we just talk about the bracket challenge and where we stand? And let's see if I can pull it up on the screen here. I think if you can see that, I don't know if you guys are able to see that on the screen or not. It is the ESPN tournament challenge site for the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. We had over 30 brackets entered. I don't know that I counted all of them. Might have been exactly 30. I'm not 100% sure. We do have 2 people already without their champion, anyone that took Villanova. So actually, someone in second place right now, actually my Aunt Steph, who is tied for second place, she's pretty much out of it with only 800 points left because her champion was Villanova. And unfortunately, for those of us in Pennsylvania and close to the Philadelphia region, if you were pulling for Villanova, once again, Jay Wright's team not getting it done in the tournament in March when it really mattered.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme with some of Jay Wright's teams. And I'm a big Villanova fan, and I, for a long time, have been a Jay Wright supporter. But this was supposed to be the team that made a run. Not necessarily win a national championship, but in all honesty, they didn't have to win a national championship this year because with Kentucky sitting there, there's really no pressure on anyone else.
Yeah.
There's no pressure on anyone else to actually win the championship. I'd say maybe Duke, but like the other teams, no team is going to be a favorite in the championship if Kentucky's there or even in the Final Four again. So Kentucky is the only one that has like a ton of pressure, in my opinion. I know that's easy for me to say. I'm not playing in the games. They don't want it to be their last game, all that stuff. But Villanova it's hard to say they didn't underachieve, even though they only had 3 losses on the season. They lost one of those games was their biggest game of the year.
Yep.
So because it was their last one, and it seems like that's happened a number of times. They couldn't. The game wasn't as close as the final score ended up being. NC State dominated that game. On the other hand, if Villanova couldn't shoot at all. Now, a lot of that was because of the pressure that NC State was putting on them, but they just couldn't get anything going until the last 40 seconds, and then tried to make a run, but it was too late.
Yeah, I'm actually looking over this here. In first place is someone who's been in first place pretty much since the first half of the games were played on Thursday, and that is Hat Guy 333, which is our friend Isaac. and he is sitting on top right now in first place with a total of 410 points. He's in the 99.3 percentile, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah, when you start making it through there, and we're on the fourth day, not counting Tuesday, Wednesday. We don't pick those games anyway. But, we're on the fourth day of the tournament, and he's still in that top 99th percentile. That's really good. So, he's – and it seems like he had been up there, and there have been a couple people tied, through some of the rounds, and then he just started separating himself, and it seems like the further we go in, the better he's doing. Now, when we looked at some of his picks, there are some,
the biggest thing that hurt him was Virginia losing.
Yeah, Virginia losing is going to hurt him when we go to the other rounds. However, I know some other people had Virginia going at least a couple more wins, and some people had Villanova going out of that bracket, that East bracket, which is for most paper brackets, and when you're looking at top right, that has screwed up a lot of people.
Right,
along
so
with
might
the
not
South bracket.
hurt him as much because a lot of people
unless people had Michigan State,
I had him in the Sweet 16,
right? Because most people probably took Michigan State, Virginia, or Villanova out of there. Well, Virginia lost and Villanova lost, so I don't think a lot of people had NC State go into the Final Four. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people getting points out of that bracket. Now, in the Final Four, he could lose some points because he had Virginia, I think, going to the championship game. So, if somebody has like Duke going to the championship game over whoever they had in the East, that they could lose some points there. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. He's got a little bit of a lead, and in some of his, he's done well enough. He might get a lot of other points in some of those other areas.
In second place, besides my aunt who lost her champion in Villanova, is actually last year's winner, Ryan Anchosik, is in second place right now with the champion of Duke and a lot of points left. He's got over 1,300 points remaining, so he's sitting in pretty good position. If Duke makes a run and ends up winning, he'll probably be the champion.
They look good today. They looked really good today.
Yeah, it looks like if Duke wins, Ryan Anchosik would repeat as champ. We'll definitely have to track him down. If he wins 2 years in a row, we got to get him on the show. So I'll have to reach out to him and see if he's interested and coming on if he wins again. And also tied for second would be me. Yeah. My second bracket with Kentucky as champ, who I kind of just was like, well, Kentucky versus the field. I feel like if I'm doing two brackets, one of them I got to take Kentucky.
Now let's be honest. If you win, but you also, well, let me rephrase that. If Kentucky goes on to win it, chalk picks may win our bracket. It's a possibility depending on what happens.
Well, there's a lot of you still have a lot more points than me with Kentucky winning, but it all depends what else plays out. Right. So, if Kentucky wins, I'm not guaranteed. If Duke wins, Ryan, we're looking down the list. No one has more points remaining. If Duke wins, I think Ryan will win. If Kentucky wins, it all depends what happens before that.
Down here, we have someone with Duke, but I think they took Maryland over Kentucky, so I don't think that's going to happen. But we'll have to wait and see.
That would be your mom. You're calling out your mom. If you didn't want to say it, I'll say it.
Yeah.
So that's an update on the bracket challenge. So my second one is tied for second. The chalk picks, which is under mine, but I don't claim. That's just to kind of say if you took all the favored people to win.
Although every year I feel like we have the discussion of we should have just gone chalk.
Then
you lose early. Actually, you would have lost on Thursday, but you would have done really well on Friday.
Right,
and
you're right.
Throughout most of the rest of the tournament, you would do fine.
Your number one did you only do one?
I only did one.
Okay, you're tied for sixth at the top there, and you got a lot of points left, so you're in good position. My number one is terrible. I'm down at 25th, but I do have Arizona winning, and they're still alive.
And just for the record, above.
I'm beating Natalie and my wife, so that's good all around there. I do want to point out who's in 22nd, though. The gentleman that we had on here last week, our basketball expert, is in the 35th percentile. Tied for 22nd in our bracket challenge.
Some room to move up if Arizona is the winner.
He does have a decent amount of points left. So it's very early. Obviously, all this changes. But we just wanted to point out a few things. We thank everyone that joined and contributed to the bracket challenge. And hopefully we get a winner that wants to come on the show. And we'll definitely make sure we get them a T-shirt. So we're going to move on here now. And I think we should do the contact information before we talk some football. So Justin's going to run that down for you right now.
So we'd love to have you call into the show. Take any of your questions or comments on the tournament so far. or the topic for tonight, we're going to get into some of the football news that we didn't get to last week. That'll be most of the rest of the show. So we'd love to have your take on any of those things. You can use the Maze Sandwich Shop hotline at 530-563-6297. Again, 530-563-6297. You can also email the Maze Sandwich Shop inbox at joemazeandjraff@gmail.com. Again, joemazeandjraff@gmail.com. We're also all over social media, and Joey will tell you about that.
Yeah, we have a Facebook fan page. We'd love for you to like us on there. We have a Twitter account at Joe Mays and J-Raff. You can follow us on there. We're eventually going to try to get the social media a little bit more interactivity. Maybe we'll start a hashtag or something if there's enough people out there watching us on Twitter, or we can encourage you to follow us on Twitter while you watch the show. We're going to introduce a little Twitter panel here on one of our feeds if you're watching us on Ustream, so it'll be a lot of fun. So definitely find us on Facebook and Twitter for those. One of our listeners wants to know where he was sitting. He's watching from home, but apparently we didn't give his name enough airtime, and he probably legitimately doesn't know where he's standing.
Didn't scroll far enough down.
Oh, you're saying he's at the bottom?
I don't know. But I saw who the text was from. That's why I said it.
Let's see if I could quick pull this up and pacify. Number 1 and number 2 are tied for 12th, Bill Mays.
Did he change anything except who won?
Apparently not. It doesn't look that way. Yeah, I know because I literally filled them out with him over my shoulder. He does have some changes, but apparently they didn't do anything because he's literally the same amount of points, and I'm willing to bet he probably has a similar amount remaining. But he is tied for 12th with a host of people at 340 points, one with Arizona winning, the other with Kentucky winning. So there we go. He's telling me I'm number 1. All right. Okay, so to send it right back to him, let's talk all evening about the Philadelphia Eagles and the football team from at least the most local. I mean, maybe there's a lot of Philadelphia fans in this area, but there's a lot of Steelers fans too. But we're not going to talk Pittsburgh everywhere. Football. There's literally Pittsburgh bars in pretty much anywhere you go.
Right, yeah. And, I mean, it's one of those things. It's not divided, kind of equally. If you look like geographically, it's more like the Susquehanna River, more so. And then when the Ravens came, that kind of threw a wrench in there too, because that York County area where you have a lot of people who commute down to Baltimore area or have moved out to that area from Baltimore, that kind of changed it too. But the Eagles definitely dominate in southeastern PA, I would say. That would include most of where I lived most of my life. So,
and Justin's reaction to the Steelers.
I hate you all so much.
That pretty much sums it up. Yeah, that was awesome.
Just throwing that out there. All right, no, let's talk about the Eagles and
winning.
And that's the direction that the Eagles hope they're going. It's been an interesting offseason to date. The league year only started not even 2 full weeks ago. The official 2015 season kicked off, I think it was like March 8th or something like that. It was on a Tuesday evening with a flurry of trades and NFL free agency activity. Now this week coming up is, I believe, the owners' meetings out in Arizona. So lots could happen with rules out there. And generally the free agent signings have tailed off, and you'll get a kick into gear after these meetings as teams return to their locales and find the second and third tier free agents to fill out their roster before the draft coming up. And actually we're going to have, I'm hoping to have a local draft expert join us on the show, possibly in studio if it works out. I've reached out to him and he's agreed to collaborate with us on an NFL draft show, which we'll be doing in April. So stay tuned for that. But focusing tonight just on the Eagles, because we kind of ran down some of the big free agency moves to date last week on the show. But just to recap, the biggest one, at least to me, was Ndamukong Suh ending up with my Miami Dolphins on a huge contract. But some of the other more notable moves was cornerback Darrelle Revis leaving the Patriots to go back to the Jets. Denver Broncos tight end Julius Thomas going to Jacksonville. A Dolphins defensive tackle, Jared Odrick, former Penn Stater and local Lancaster or Lebanon, I believe.
I think he's from Lebanon, but I'm not 100% sure.
Went to Jacksonville as well. Baltimore Ravens wide receiver Torrey Smith went to the 49ers. Texans wide receiver Andre Johnson was released and ended up signing with the Colts. But the biggest team in activity and kind of dominating some of the talk all across the NFL world was the Eagles. And that's not only from their signings, which we talked about last week, them adding Seahawks cornerback Byron Maxwell, Giants cornerback Walter Thurmond, Packers linebacker Brad Jones, Chargers running back Ryan Matthews, and then the big one, at least name and because of where he came from, was DeMarco Murray on a big deal. Him and Matthews are expected to replace the departed LaShawn McCoy, who they traded to acquire a linebacker and Kiko Alonso. And then they did a quarterback shuffle where they sent Nick Foles and draft picks, essentially, to the Rams for injured quarterback Bradford, who, by any statistical measure, has underachieved as the number one pick. He has the last year of his rookie deal, the last year when rookie contracts were guaranteed at that high amount. So it's interesting to see what are the Eagles going to do with their quarterback situation. Are they sticking with Bradford? They re-signed Mark Sanchez basically as a backup. The money that he's getting is typical backup money.
Right, and there were some people, especially like non-Eagles fans. Some Eagles fans were a little worried about that, but you kind of knew that he wasn't the guy, and the contract they gave him kind of told you he wasn't the guy. But when they gave him that, you gave him money that you would give to a proven backup quarterback, and that's what Mark Sanchez has kind of proven himself to be right now. And I have no problem with that contract, and even that was before the other stuff kind of worked out. Now that you have, as of right now, with Sam Bradford being the quarterback, you would have to imagine that you would definitely end up with a backup that would be ready to go at a moment's notice, because Sam Bradford has kind of needed that over the course of his career, not just in the pros, but also when he was at Oklahoma and some of those issues as well. Now, how that'll play out this year, I don't know. I mentioned it last week. One of the subtractions from the Eagles was Jeremy Maclin. I know a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, I heard a number of people complain to me, they got rid of Maclin. No, they didn't. Maclin chose to leave. Now, you could say they should have offered him more money, especially at the time they had more money to offer to him. And that I understand that argument, but they didn't trade him. You can say they got rid of Shady and they got rid of Foles. Like, you can be upset over if you're going to be upset at someone, though, Macklin's the one that left. I don't blame him for leaving. He went to Andy Reid, who drafted him and kind of stuck with him, when he had some of those injuries in college, and they still took him, and he worked out to be pretty good. I find it interesting that he went to Kansas City, who didn't have a touchdown thrown to a wide receiver last year, and left the Eagles. Now, some of that might have been, again, it wasn't the system he came in to the NFL. No, it wasn't one of those things, but it's just one of those. I'm not all that. I would have, if I had the choice, I'd love to see Maclin stay. But if he had his heart set on leaving, and he was going to get $55 million to leave, sorry, I don't feel like you should give. People are complaining about Bradford giving a $55 million contract to a wide receiver who has multiple knee injuries. That would raise just as much of a red flag to me, as opposed to a quarterback that had 1 year on his contract left, I think, for like $13 million. I don't. Maclin left. I think they'll be okay. I think you can find somebody. I don't know where, and I don't know immediately, but I think you'll be able to replace Maclin.
Matthews had a good year. Mm-hmm. They have who else in the system? Huff and Riley Cooper still around. They're obviously going to be shopping. I don't think they've added a wide receiver yet in free agency. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of tier 2 guys out there. Greg Jennings was released. Michael Crabtree was let to become a free agent. There's plenty of other guys out there as well. Or they could go in the draft and grab a guy. They did it last year in the second round with Matthews. Could they look in the first? They're sitting there at 20, prepared to do whatever. We're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks and trades and whatnot here shortly. But the Eagles are just an interesting franchise right now, and it just so happens that you're a fan of them, and we talk about it because of our location. But they're definitely a team that you have to examine to look at where the NFL is going to go this next year. But before we go to big picture or focus on something specific, let's finish off the transactions we know to date. The Eagles also let go of Todd Hermans, who had been here for a long time.
Right. And that was one where you're like, oh man, they needed to be maybe shore up the offensive line a little bit. Now that's really tough to gauge though, because 2 years ago, all 5 starters started all 16 games, and they were incredible. And then this past year, they had something like 12 different starting combinations on the offensive line.
Well, it didn't help that Lane Johnson was suspended to start
the
year.
Right, exactly. But it was just kind of one thing after another on the offensive line this past year. Well, neither of those, hopefully you don't end up with the repeat of the injuries, but you can't really expect everyone to be, injury-free the whole year either. So, hopefully they'll get somewhere in between there. Well, hopefully they end up with all 5 starters starting every game, because not only does that mean they're doing well, but it means they're staying healthy. But that's unrealistic. Hermans has been with the team for a while. I think they feel like they can kind of replace him and build through maybe some younger guys there. And you can pick up, some of those interior linemen, not on the first day, and you can get quality guys not even on the second day of the draft, later in the draft. Obviously you can, get some of those top level guys earlier on, but interior linemen you can sometimes get a little bit later. You can get great value later on. So, I don't really have a problem with it. I just hope, they're not. That's the one position where at wide receiver and running back and stuff, I'm like, you know what? I kind of believe in Chip's system. I think it'll make it work enough. Offensive line, you have to have capable bodies there. I don't think you can just run anyone out there. And so that's the area there. And then on defense, I think that's where you need to be the best. And so hopefully they're able to add some quality people there and I don't know, solidify that line position a little bit.
Joining him, Hermans went to the Colts. Joining him there was defensive end, or more recently outside linebacker Trent Cole. Tight end Casey was released. Free safety Nate Allen was let go in free agency. Wide receiver Brad Smith. Quarterback Kerry Williams went to the Seahawks. Cornerback Bradley Fletcher went to the Patriots. And linebacker Casey Matthews was not re-signed.
So I feel like Fletcher's going to be the best of the group just because he went to the Patriots and it has nothing to do with what he did. But Fletcher, I don't worry at all that he left. Matthews, again, not worried at all. And when you look at Trent Cole, he had a great run with the Eagles. He doesn't fit the system anymore. You have talked to me about that since they brought in this defensive system a couple years ago when they hired Chip and he hired some of his when he hired defensive coordinator and things like that, and they moved to they are reluctant to call it like that straight 3-4, but it is kind of like a 3-4, and it's that hybrid kind of thing.
I think they call it a 4-3 under or 4-3
right,
over. Yeah. That's what they were calling it, but it's essentially...
But he was having to play outside linebacker instead of
and honestly,
pass rushing defensive end. And he did better than we thought.
I didn't think he was going to be able to do it, and he did it very well. He better be able to do it well because he's going to Indianapolis, who employs a similar system.
Right. But I feel like in Philly, it was only a matter of time until they were going to need him to start covering more in pass coverage, and that was something they struggled with this year. And I think that's his area on defense. That was his area of weakness. Getting after the quarterback, he could do, but you can't expect a guy. Think about what if he loses a half step. Well, you lose a half step when you're going into coverage. All right, you're going to get burned.
That's an issue.
Now, and you lose a half step as a pass rusher. Well, now that might cut a quarter of your sacks off. So I think, he's been in the league. I think it's something like he had been on the Eagles 9 years or something like that. It surprised me how long he had actually been there. You can't expect a just pure pass. He's not a pure pass rusher. That would be selling him short. We thought he was. And then he proved himself to actually do it. Right. But I think for a guy who kind of was put in that position, he did have a lot of pressure on the quarterback, but I think you can find a guy who better fits that spot, and maybe not immediately. They kind of missed last year when they in the first round. So, I'm not like super confident that they're going to make a great defensive pick, but hopefully they can kind of get things straightened out and find somebody who fits that system.
Yeah.
And in reality, if you get a good coverage guy there, you can maybe look to get some pressure from the other areas and pressure from the schemes, like that. And I think that's what they may need to be able to do.
The Marcus Smith from Louisville pick last year.
I know. You said it to me right away. Yeah.
And it wasn't so much that, I didn't think he would be.
It was just 2 days early.
It was too early. Like, I could see it in the second round if you're like, well, we might be without our outside linebackers next year, because at the time, Connor Barwin hadn't done real well.
But think about this.
Brandon Graham, you didn't know what was going to happen with him. Trent Cole, he was on the wrong side of 30. We need a pass rusher. Probably not this year, but down the line. That's fine. But in the first round?
And they could have considered stretching for him in the late second round. And instead, they took him in the late first round. That was just kind of that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I was just like, what? I just couldn't believe it. And at the time I covered the Eagles for Draft Tech.
I don't even want to know who was still available.
Well, that's what I was just gonna. I was just gonna look up who was still available when the Eagles made that pick, and
they traded back.
At least they traded back.
Yeah,
but at the time, they could have had Manziel at 22 because that's who they traded with. The Eagles were picking 22.
I'd rather have. I would have rather had Smith.
They could have had D Ford, who really didn't do much this past year. Darquez Denard, the cornerback from Michigan State.
Okay.
Jason Barrett from TCU for the Chargers. There's the Eagles with Marcus Smith at 26.
Kelvin Benjamin.
They could have taken Kelvin Benjamin, which I had mocked to the Eagles multiple times. Passed on him.
Bradley.
Dominic Easley, who was an injured guy. Wow, could have been once he got back on his feet and he's playing for the Patriots. But if they would have put him opposite, oh wow, no, I can't think of his name. The defensive lineman, the Eagles, the defensive end. He was miscast in a 4-3, but is dominant in a 3-4. I can't think of his name. It's just escapes me right now. But that would have been an understandable pick. They needed safety help, and you see Deone Buchanan and Jimmy Ward both went. Now I'm not sure either of them had a great year.
Well, and
Bradley Roby didn't do much.
Right.
They didn't. You got to think they didn't need Teddy Bridgewater at the time.
Right.
So now you're looking at guys in the second. Same thing. They could have used a guard. DeMarcus Lawrence was a great pick for the Cowboys. Right. Joel Petonio looks like an incredible pickup.
Yep.
He was a nice pick for the Browns in the third pick of the second round. There's no one that stands out right here, and then the Eagles got Jordan Matthews. It's almost like you would have liked them to flip that based on what happened.
Right.
Jordan Matthews was a better pick in the second round, in the 42nd overall, than Marcus Smith was.
Right.
Where they got him. Now, not too many of these people made a big impact. Now, Devontae Adams had a couple good games with the Packers, but when you have Jordan Matthews, you're not going to get hit up too much for that. Jeremy Hill was good for the Bengals.
Yes.
At the time, though, did the Eagles need a running back? Probably not. Carlos Hyde, same thing there, but also another running back. He would have loved to see him get Allen Robinson, but they just took Jordan Matthews and they're not going to pick him up. Jarvis Landry had an incredible year for the Dolphins. That was a great pick by Miami there. Looking back on it, based on the impact from the first year, now obviously the systems would have been different, domino effects and whatnot. You can't exactly translate everything back and forth, but it doesn't look like they maybe made a huge mistake. Now, they're not getting a lot of production from their first round pick, but they picked it up with their second round pick.
Right.
So there's trade-offs all around.
And when you look at some of the other guys that were taken, it wasn't like a lot of them really, lit the league on fire. Like when you look at it, and that's kind of interesting, especially 1 year removed, because it's kind of tough to kind of judge some of these guys on 1 year. But that's why a lot of those rookie contracts are like 3-4 years usually.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the round.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things where they miss, but who knows? Maybe eventually he'll be able to fit into the system. I know there was some question about his development last year, but hopefully there's enough there that they can at least turn him into some kind of role player where he can. And that's not what you want from your first round picks, which is exactly why when we talk about the situation they've put themselves in now. All right, so we've alluded to the quarterback issue. They traded Nick Foles for Sam Bradford.
Right. And
I said, I don't know if I said it to you, but I said to a lot of people, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not like, yes, we've got Sam Bradford. That's incredible. I'm worried about his knees.
Well, if
I'm
it was
worried about all those other
2008,
things.
you might be.
Right, exactly. But, I'm worried about his ACL injuries. I'm worried about all that stuff. I'm worried about, like, what if he has – a lot of people think they're going to sign him to an extension before the season, which I think is a smart move. You build clauses in there based on, health and all that stuff. Because if he, like, lights it up in the Chip Kelly system, well, now you have a free agent quarterback.
Excellent.
So
Absolutely excellent.
so you just need to be, like, careful, like, how you handle this situation. However, a lot of people reacted like they traded away Peyton Manning or Tom Brady and, like, first-round picks forever.
Yeah.
Like, they traded Nick Foles.
This is, like, when the Eagles traded Nick Foles, you had to think...
Nick Foles, who most of the people who were arguing over were also saying, Nick Foles isn't the answer. Nick Foles isn't the answer. Well, I understand if they think Sam Bradford isn't the answer as well. Like, I get that. I'm not saying he is. But... let Chip move the pieces. This is what, like, I'm kind of looking at. They're like, oh, well, Chip took over a 4-12 team. He took players that weren't his and got them to 10 wins, and they made the playoffs and lost the game. They won 10 wins again last year and didn't make the playoffs. Now, they won 10 games, and they also...
They were doing that with Mark Sanchez.
They switched quarterbacks. And, look, we just talked about all the problems they had on the offensive line last year. Their second-best offensive lineman was suspended the first quarter of the season. Their best lineman, was out on left tackle, and he did fine. The rest of the linemen,
Evan Mathis is generally the best lineman, but he missed, 6 games.
Right.
Didn't Kelsey miss games,
and now there's
too?
talk about, about Mathis maybe being on the trading block and stuff like that.
Now your offensive line is enough people, which isn't good.
Right.
When you have the history of injuries that Sam Bradford has now the last 2 years with the Rams and in college as well. But the quarterback thing, that's all it matters in the NFL. It's all about the quarterback.
And here's the thing, and I've said this, and I think it's true. You can win with a superstar quarterback, right? You can win with a superstar quarterback. But at the same time, you can also win with a good enough quarterback and really good everywhere else. And I think right now that's what the Eagles have. I don't think they have an elite quarterback. I don't mean it like which quarterback's elite or not.
He's a question mark.
Right. But, there's no doubt in my mind that he could be good enough. Could be. I'm not saying he will be, but I think he could be good enough. He did it his rookie year. He was good enough. Now, he's kind of regressed since then, but mostly because of injuries, not because of his play.
Also, until Jeff Fisher got there, the Rams had... What weapons have the Rams had? Steven Jackson couldn't ever stay healthy.
No.
Who were his wide receivers until they started adding everyone?
Everyone talks about
Tavon
Steven
Austin,
Jackson.
Kenny Britt, Stedman Bailey.
This is another just random thought. Everybody talks about Steven Jackson like he's a great running back that put up a lot of yards in St. Louis on bad teams. Yeah, but I'd argue that some of those teams were bad because he couldn't stay healthy a full season. He was good for 10 games a season.
Well, that's why the Mark Sanchez re-signing was so important.
Right.
Now, Sanchez isn't going to win you the Super Bowl.
Right.
I don't think he's good at... I don't think he's Trent Dilfer.
Here's another key part, though. And I saw this, and I honestly don't remember who it was on Twitter. But, you want to look at... People rip Sanchez because they kind of fell apart under him under the last part of the year. And I understand that. But if you look at the schedule, who they played in the first half and who versus who Mark Sanchez had to start against versus who Nick Foles had to start against last year, and not just who, but how that opponent was playing at the time. Nick Foles had some cupcake games, or games that should have been cupcake games, whereas Mark Sanchez ran into Dallas when they were hitting their stride. Mark Sanchez had to play a couple teams that really kind of had hit their stride and were teeing off on the Eagles a little bit. Now, you had the opposite. Nick Foles had to play Arizona, but at the same time, Arizona, they should have won that game. Huff fumbled inside the 5. They made a ton of mistakes. They also had a shot at the end and just didn't, they had 2 games last year, Arizona and San Francisco, where they had the ball inside the 10 with, as time's expiring, and they didn't score on either play. So when you look at it, I just think, while I'm concerned about Sam Bradford, I think that, there's certainly some potential there. And I wasn't set on Nick Foles being the guy anyway. I was kind of Nick Foles is the guy until Chip gets his guy. That's the boat I was in. Nick Foles is the guy, and he's there until Chip gets whoever he wants.
Right.
Now that leads us to an interesting point with Sam Bradford. Is Sam Bradford the guy until they get the guy Chip really wants?
Right.
I know Chip has said that's not the case, but they're never going to be like... If it's
not the case, you would think that by mid-season, if the Eagles are
right.
like, say by week 8, if the Eagles are 6-2 and Bradford's playing well, you
got to
expect that you're getting an extension, or he's not. Like,
right.
Well, then you have a huge problem. Are you going to franchise him and massively... like double his salary essentially? Right. Like the franchise number for quarterback is massive.
Or do you put what is the transition tag? Do you get like 2 firsts for that?
Yeah, I don't know the exact compensation, but
here's the thing: like if you franchise him, the quarterback will hate that. You transition him, the quarterback will hate it, but maybe somebody will trade for him. But nobody's giving you 2 first-round picks for Sam Bradford. Although they just said
you got to protect yourself.
They've also said, and again, this could be completely made up. They've said they've already been offered a first-round pick.
Who was it from? The Browns. It had to be at 19, right in front of where the Eagles are.
Right, exactly.
Now, and this leads into the final discussion that we'll probably have is if Bradford's not the answer, is the answer Marcus Mariota?
I don't know if Marcus Mariota
Does Chip
is the
Kelly
answer,
think
but
that?
I'll be honest. It would be fun to watch, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be like from just a purely like, and I'm not even talking football yet, from a pure story standpoint, wouldn't it be crazy if in a month from now the Eagles are moving, like it gets to draft day, and all of a sudden,
it'll be exciting for sure. I'm not an Eagles fan,
right.
so it means nothing to me.
All of a sudden, Goodell's walking up to the podium.
He has
a pink card instead of like the blue card or whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever way it works.
And all of a sudden, there's a trade, and people are going nuts. Now, here's the thing: what if he's walking up with that trade color thing, and it's not the Eagles? What if somebody else trades?
Well,
that would be insane.
I would be surprised if Jameis Winston isn't the first pick to the Bucs. That would surprise me.
I agree.
So now everything's focused on the Titans at 2. What are they going to do? Do they believe that Mettenberger is their future and that they're going to roll with the veterans that they have?
And then I heard this week too. Like, there's fear that I guess Phillip Rivers is going into the last year of his deal in San Diego.
And doesn't want to sign an extension.
Right, he doesn't want to sign in San Diego, and like there's talk that the Titans may want him, and then they would trade, and then the San Diego Chargers get Mariota like at 2.
Right,
which I don't see that necessarily as a great fit, but okay.
The Titans only have Mettenberger and Whitehurst. Are they sold on Mettenberger? If they're sold on Mettenberger, they're not going to take Mariota at 2. Would they be in play for Rivers? They're not going to trade the number 2 pick for Phillip Rivers. I'm sorry, that's just not happening. That's way too much for Phillip Rivers. Well, I think he's
way past his prime. Probably.
Well, he's in the twilight of his prime.
Right,
he's going to start going downhill. He probably would be good for a handful more years, but the Titans aren't ready to win right now.
Right.
Giving up the number 2 pick for Rivers 3 years ago, yeah, that's probably a pretty good transaction. Now, no. So you're almost thinking that the Titans should trade back to get a lower first-round pick.
Like maybe 20th?
And trade that to San Diego.
But at that point, San Diego wouldn't be getting up to number 2.
Can you imagine a 3-team trade involving Phillip Rivers, the Eagles moving up to get Mariota?
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Like, they wouldn't, like, Titans, or if maybe San Diego's not set on Mariota, though, and they, like, come in at 20 or, somewhere else.
Well, I just mean, like, there's a little, like in the NBA, a 3-team trade.
Right.
Or the Titans trade their second pick to the Eagles at pick 20 and whatever they give up. If they have to give up a 2016 first rounder, if they give up, second, third, whatever it would end up being. And then the Titans send the 20th pick to the Chargers for Rivers. It's just like this cyclical thing. I guess that's not exactly how it would work. It's like a circle. So, but yeah, the Titans have nothing at quarterback right now. Unless if they think Mettenberger's the guy, then this is all, moot.
Do you think they think Mettenberger's the guy?
I honestly don't know.
It's the Titans. Who knows?
Who knows, right? Yeah, exactly. So,
but here, okay. Do you think the Eagles should make a play for Mariota?
To me, it depends on what it costs.
Let's say Mariota doesn't go at 2. and he gets the 6 at the Jets. Now, some people think the Jets would take him. Like the Jets could use him. I think that's a possibility. I think that's a tough sell. Maybe when you just went out and got another defensive coach.
I don't think they necessarily have to take him or want to take him. I think they'd be willing to listen to offers.
I think they would certainly express interest at the point of trades, but it's just kind of crazy to think about, like, if he doesn't go at 2. But
if the Titans aren't sold on Mariota or really think Mettenberger's the guy, you got to think that someone who is sold on Mariota should trade up with him, because he's not going to the Jags.
Right.
He's not going to the Raiders.
Nope.
He's probably not going to the Redskins,
Right,
but you
right.
never know. What's going to happen in Washington with their 3-headed quarterback
Right.
from last year. Nothing's different. It's the same guys in Robert Griffin III, Kirk Cousins, and Colt McCoy. They're all back in Washington with Jay Gruden.
He's not going to go to Chicago because they still have Jay Cutler, and even though they don't want Jay Cutler, they still have him.
If the Bears could unload Cutler on draft day, he could be an option.
Yeah, but they might have to give somebody the first to unload Jay Cutler.
So you would think that the places that make most sense for Mariota are, well, 1, but it's going to be Winston. 2 with the Titans. 6 with the Jets, with the Redskins and Bears being kind of
just like if something crazy
interesting
happens.
spots, but they could capitalize on a trade. He's not going to go to Atlanta. They're comfortable with Matt Ryan. You don't think he's going to the Giants because Tom Coughlin and Eli are bound at the hip.
The Rams just traded
for Foles.
Right.
They're not going to take him. The Vikings drafted Bridgewater, and there's your winner right there.
Cleveland Browns.
They're looking for a quarterback. They lost Brian Hoyer. They don't have. They just took Manziel, though. Are they going to abandon that? Now was in and now out of rehab for
substance
abuse that he took care of it himself. It's not like he was arrested or anything. He figured he has a problem.
Hopefully that's a way, because I want him to get a shot. I want him to either make it or not make it in the NFL based on whether he's good enough or not good enough.
Play, yes.
Not based on can he fight these other demons, because that's a shame for anyone. But yeah, I want to know if he can play. They can't take a quarterback at 12 though. I mean, they can.
You don't think? I don't think they would, because they have Manziel and you just invested a first-round pick on him last year. Why would you bail now? But if they really wanted to give the 19th pick for Bradford, would it be a surprise? I don't know. The Browns are also one of those teams that's interesting.
Right.
Then you get the 13 and the Saints. This could possibly very well be Drew Brees' last year, not only with the Saints, but maybe in the NFL. This could be the end of his career coming up. The Saints are a mess. They're just
his contract is a mess.
His contract is just it's just like an anchor weighing them down. So Brees could be done with the Saints. Do they look to the future? Because if he doesn't go to 13, he's not going 14. Miami's all in with Tannehill. They have to be. Same thing with the 49ers, at least for now. They're with Kaepernick.
Here's the thing, and you're getting into that zone. Like, if Mariota wasn't taken yet, you got to think
someone's jumping
Chip
up.
is jumping out of his seat at this point.
But is he? Everyone says he loves Mariota.
See, and this is the great point, though. Yeah, because even if he doesn't go and get Mariota, the chances are that, and the teams at the top of the draft have got to love this too, because even if they know, if they've talked to Eagles and the Eagles are not interested, like, other teams may not know that, and there's somebody might overpay for that spot. And I honestly kind of thought that's what was happening with the DeMarco Murray. I was like, well, this is win-win, because the Eagles either get him.
Hello, my name is Bree.
The Eagles either get him or they don't, and the Cowboys have to pay a lot more than they wanted to. So I was kind of fine with that either way. And maybe that'll happen here. Like, somebody else ends up moving up for him, but they have to pay a lot more than they thought. Or somebody like the Jets take him thinking the Eagles are going to, like, trade him, like, a la, Eli Manning, when he was drafted by the Chargers, and Philip Rivers ended up going there, all that stuff. And the Eagles don't trade. Now the Jets are sitting there and they spent their first-round pick on a quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it would be tough, like, because I feel like part of the sell to DeMarco Murray coming to Philly was Sam Bradford, one of his best friends and college roommate, and guy like that they ran this offense with in Oklahoma.
And that's
and here's the thing: if Mariota went like some kind of version of Aaron Rodgers and was there at 20, take him. Take him at 20. If he's not available, I don't want to move up though and get him. We have too many other needs.
Right, that's one of the things I want to say. I think the Eagles, and I'm thinking Chip Kelly's smart enough to realize we can't get rid of everything just to land this guy who I recruited.
And that's
to
what he
Oregon.
said. That's what he said at the press conference. Like I will never mortgage the future to move up.
Is
that
it a
high.
smokescreen? I don't know, but you got to think that he's smart enough to know. Hey, if he falls for some reason and we're on the clock and he's there. Yeah, maybe we take him and just say, hey, Bradford's on a 1-year deal. He has a history of injuries. If Mariota can come in and learn behind him this year, take over next year, or even we sign Bradford to a couple of years, let Mariota sit behind him like Rodgers and Favre. Hey, win-win situation. But if I'm him, I don't mortgage the future for Mariota.
Right.
There's, like you said, there's too many other needs. Now, you think you solved the secondary. You got rid of 2 guys and added 2 guys.
Yeah, but I would kind of if there was a high value in the first round is kind of tough. But if there's a guy you could get like a safety or a cornerback at that number 20 spot, like I'd prefer a cornerback at 20. But like if there's a high quality guy there, man, that could be a great pick and put him with some of those veterans you got in the backfield now. Like that could be huge.
The unfortunate thing for everyone in the NFL draft this year is it's a crappy draft.
Right.
There's only like 10 to 20, I've heard 15 thrown out mostly, that 15 worthy of first-round picks.
Right.
So
then
that's good for the Dolphins picking at 14,
and then you
possibly bad for the Eagles picking at 20.
You possibly end up with a ton of trades in that other area where you're not getting a lot of picks in return, but somebody that caught somebody's attention, somebody moving back up. I shouldn't say in the second half. In like that 23 to the end of the first round, you see a number of trades there usually, but it would be interesting to just kind of see how that plays out. I don't know. I don't know what Chip's going to do. I worry on many levels if they trade for Mariota. But at the same time, like, it would be fun to watch. It would be fun to watch unfold. It would either, be glorious or the downfall of Chip Kelly. But let's be honest, like, he's already kind of made some moves that he probably has a couple years, and then that it'll be how's he doing now? If they continue to build, they need to be in the contention for the playoffs this year. If they're not, I think you'll hear lots of whining because of all the moves they made. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch this all unfold.
It's it's a terrible year for safeties in the draft, so that's not good because the Eagles need one. And they're not getting Landon Collins unless they move up. I highly doubt Landon Collins is going to be not going to be picked in the first 19 picks. It's a very good year for receivers, though, which bodes well for the Eagles because they need one. At 20, if they stay put, they're probably looking at Louisville's Devontae Parker. Former Missouri and Oklahoma wide receiver Dorial Green Beckham was the number 1 pick recruit in the nation a few years back. Jalen Strong from Arizona State, Sammy Coates from Auburn. Those would probably be first-round options. Then in the second round, Nelson Aguilar, Devin Smith, Rashad Green, and possibly Devin Funchess, who's like a weird hybrid from Michigan. Those are all guys. I would expect the Eagles to take a receiver with one of their first 2 picks. Those are some guys I think that Eagles fans should be prepared to know in the future. What's the other position they're going to address? Like I said, safety's not a great one. Could be a cornerback, but you just signed Maxwell to a huge deal. Now, I think Thurman's on a short-term thing, and Boykin's your nickel,
Thurman might be
slot.
like a 1-year deal, I think.
Right, so you still have needs there. They had a couple young guys. I don't know if they're going to jump up or not. So cornerback could still be addressed. I don't know that their number 1 ranked cornerback, who I think most people have, is Trey Waynes. I doubt he's available at 20, but a guy like Jalen Collins, Alex Carter, Marcus Peters, also all could be available at 20. And another guy that's rising up, and I know is visiting with the Eagles, is Kevin Johnson from Wake Forest. He's a big body. He's 6'2", 215. He'd be a great perimeter defender. He's got the size.
Do you think they get him with, like,
I don't think he's available.
I
don't think he'll be available. No, I don't think he'll be left in the second round. Marcus Peters is an interesting one because he could have possibly been in contention or with Trey Waynes for the number 1 CB spot, and he might have actually been the number 1, potentially top 10 pick, pushing it. but he got kicked off the team at Washington for multiple
that's good.
disciplinary issues. I don't think it was really so much off the field as in outside of football. It was actually on the football field and his actions.
Wonderful.
So, is it something that, every team is different, every coach is different, every front office is different.
You got to look.
The talent is there. Where is he going to be drafted? That same thing goes with the receiver.
Stanford, Washington, both Pac-10 guys there, with Peters and Alex Carter, who's listed there. Pac-10 guys, and
right.
he's been all over
associations with that, and same things. Arizona State. That's why Jalen Strong from Arizona State was actually the pick in the most recent Draft Tech mock. But we'll talk a lot more about Eagles draft in the weeks coming up as the draft approaches at the very end of April. And like I said, we'll have a draft analyst on with us in a couple weeks, I hope, and we'll do a ton of draft then. So,
it's going to be interesting. I kind of hope the Eagles address some other needs because I think they could use some talent to go around whoever is the quarterback. And I honestly think that Bradford, if they can keep him healthy, which is a huge if. I understand that, and there's obviously no guarantee. If you had to bet on him starting 16 games or not, you're probably better off betting on that he's not going to start 16 games. But, that's why you have Sanchez there. So you're hoping it's not an ACL injury. But if he can start 13, 14 games, you get 2 starts out of Sanchez, can you win 11 or 12 games?
Right.
That's what it comes down to. And I think on offense, I think if they add a wide receiver, shore up the line a little bit, I think they can with their scheme and with the guys they have if they can stay healthy. The question will be on defense. I don't know that they have an 11-win defense. Actually, I think they could add a couple pieces and have an 11 or 12-win defense. Mm-hmm. But as it sits right now, I think defense is the bigger question mark in my mind, despite those injuries on offense.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to add about the Eagles offseason to date? We're going to talk about Eagles and NFL for a couple more weeks.
The one thing
I
mentioned to you, in my opinion, LaShawn McCoy coming out and saying that the signing of Murray and Ryan Matthews was a panic move by the Eagles. I think that's an example of why he's not on the Eagles anymore. Like, he and Chip Kelly have kind of butted heads, kind of like passive-aggressively, like the whole time, like how LaShawn didn't like the whole, sleep methods and all that other stuff that Chip was doing. There was entire articles written about how, he took him a while to buy in and all that stuff. They've butted heads the whole time. I don't think it wasn't all that surprising to see him gone, especially because he had a big cap number this year.
All right, so I think that's everything. We're going to have to wind down here and sign off. But NFL is always going to be big here. It's just something that we like to talk about. We're going to probably divert and talk a little bit other topics here coming up in the next few weeks. We have to do a baseball preview. We'll do maybe a listener special. There's a bunch of things that we'd like to cover. And we'll get back to football sometime in April leading up to the draft. But we hope you enjoyed talking about Eagles football here this evening. But I think that's it. So thanks for joining us. That wraps up the 167th episode or 168th episode of the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show.
We hope you tune in every Sunday evening at 6:30 for our take on sports. Until next time, I'm J-Raff.
And I'm Joe Mays. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Joe Mays and J-Raff Show. Don't forget, you can download each episode of the show from the podcast section of the iTunes Store. We'll see you next time, and thanks again for listening.